and welcome to another episode of This Week in Cleantech. It's a roundup of the week's biggest stories you need to know in climate and clean energy in 15 minutes or less. Today is Friday, May 31st, 2024. I'm Renewable Energy World Editor-in-Chief John Engel. Stephen Robert Miller from Yale E360 will be joining us shortly. But for now, I'm joined by my good friend and PR veteran, Mike Casey of TigerCom. Hello, Mike. How are you?
Hello, Mr. Engel. Have you ever wondered why it is that I broadcast from our multi-million-dollar world headquarters for This Week in Cleantech, and you're usually at some undisclosed location and down in Asheville? I think there's an imbalance there.
Okay.
I don't know what to make of it.
By multi-million-dollar studio, do you mean that sheet hanging up behind you in your office so that we don't see a whiteboard with how to make money with big underlined bars underneath it?
Hey, everybody's got to read their Stephen Covey book, okay?
Yeah.
Everybody's got to.
That's right. Okay, and I do want to remind everyone, we're about a month away from Grid Tech Connect Forum California. So that's our interconnection event that we bring together utilities, developers, regulators. Join us in Newport Beach, and I'll make sure to include a link in the show notes here. So, Mike, I've been very busy, so now it's time to promote. We also want to thank all of our listeners who have told us how much they appreciate this weekly segment and send in those story recommendations. You can do that by emailing us at rew@clarionevents.com. All right, Mike, your turn. Get us started.
Yes, sir. Maxine Josla. We've been using a lot of her stuff lately on this show, I got to say.
Yeah, she's a staple.
Good. Nicola Groom, Maxine Josla. We're going to have I think a Mount Rushmore This Week in Cleantech, and they're going to be up there. All right. She writes for the Washington Post, and she has a piece. The U.S. just took its biggest step yet to end coal mining. John, your thoughts?
Yeah, much of U.S. fossil fuel comes from federal lands and waters, contributing nearly a quarter of the nation's carbon pollution from 2005 to 2014. This month, the Biden administration announced it will end new coal leasing in one of those areas, the Powder River Basin, which produces almost half of America's coal supply. The basin's 14 active coal mines can continue to operate on their leased lands, but they can't expand onto other public lands in the region. This could prevent billions of tons of coal from being extracted over 13 million acres in Montana and Wyoming. Seems pretty significant, Mike.
Yeah. I heard someone once say that the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, and the second best time to plant a tree is now. So this BLM move and others like it from a climatological standpoint should have been done 20 years ago, but let's welcome it now as the hour grows late. So there is, of course, the predictable hewing and crying from the ideology over reality crowd who haven't really spotted us a planet B for us to all move to when we fry this one. So, they're setting aside the carping from the elected officials who are rented by the coal industry. I think what's notable is this was enabled by the fact that coal just isn't economical anymore, despite the decades of government coddling and subsidization it's enjoyed. From 2015 to 2023, U.S. coal output dropped 36%, and more coal plants are proposed to close as we deploy wind, solar, and batteries continuously. The EPA has finalized new standards last week requiring coal plants to close or capture 90% of their pollution by 2039. Coal's on its way out. The shift to renewables is inevitable. So I say let's take the win. John, story number 2.
Yeah, and the last comment on consequences of elections. If there is a change in the White House, this is one of those snap my fingers if I'm Donald Trump and it's over day one.
For
so
sure.
BLM,
For
EPA,
sure.
Federal leasing, pauses, all that kind of stuff. It's very important. Our second story is from David Wallace Wells from the New York Times, titled, "Can Biden Actually Win This Trade War?" Mike.
So I suppose, John, you and I are going to know if we've arrived on this show, if we ever persuade Mr. Wallace Wells to come on the show. He does produce such thoughtful analysis. So, David, if you hear this, we want to have you on this year. So, John,
he's not listening to this, Mike. I love when you do that.
Hey,
Secretary Granholm, if you're listening, make sure to include this in your press release. Go on. Sorry.
Elon Musk emailed me and said he was sick and tired of my personal attacks and wanted you to back him up. So he listens. All right, John, you and I recently covered Biden's tariff increase on EVs and other Chinese exports. Decades ago, would have been unthinkable for the U.S. to impose these trade protections. But fairer trade is now the bipartisan consensus and seen by the Biden administration as a way to simultaneously tackle climate disruption and U.S. economic security. Sometimes these goals are at odds. So on one hand, you've got cheap Chinese EVs. They'd be great for the climate, but disastrous for the U.S. automaking sector. They make up a lot of bricks in the foundation of the U.S. economy. And President Biden's allocated more than $2 trillion in cleaner industrial policy through the IRA, the Infrastructure Bill, and the CHIPS Act. So now he's trying to ensure that there'll be domestic demand for all the new things we're going to be manufacturing in the years ahead. John, your thoughts?
Yeah, and David notes that China still dominates 80% of the clean energy supply chain, and America owns almost none of it. There's an efficiency that comes with that, but it's also a liability. It makes sense to protect a domestic manufacturing base and to ensure we have energy security. They have to go hand in hand. Tariffs alone will not make a domestic market. I think we know that by now. Mike, our third story.
John Byrne Murdoch from the Financial Times wrote how red Texas became a model for green energy. My friend, I think this is kind of the sleeper story for this week. I think it's a big deal.
Yeah, it is an interesting one. So 5 years ago, California had more than 6 times as much solar as Texas, but on May 14th, Texas hit 19.1 gigawatts of solar energy generation, setting the new U.S. record and bumping California into second place. Texas has now deployed 23.6 gigawatts of utility scale solar compared to California's 21.2 gigawatts. Now, California admittedly has a lot more distributed solar and storage than Texas, but that's another point. The Lone Star State also trails only California in battery storage deployment, most of that at the utility scale level. After Texas connects the latest group of solar plants to the grid, it will have added more solar capacity per capita in a year than any other U.S. state or country worldwide. Mike, your thoughts on Texas?
I got a bunch of them here. So first, economics usually win eventually. But second, Texas is winning the clean energy race almost in spite of its crop of ideology over reality politicians who will ask how high when the gas industry tells them to jump. Third, and this is something that I don't think we've ever talked about here on the show, but I think Gavin Newsom has hurt himself in the 2028 presidential primary by enabling the gutting of his state's residential solar industry. So the job losses and the economic harm not just happened on his watch, they can credibly be pinned to him. And I think we're going to see in the next several years as the jostling for that race in 2028, you're going to see rivals like Gretchen Whitmer and Governor Beshear of Kentucky take advantage of that unless Governor Newsom cleans up this mess, because right now he's going to wear it. I just don't think he feels the weight of it right now. John, our fourth story.
Yeah, number 4, written by Robinson Meyer from Heatmap News, titled Biden's Long Game on Climate. Mike.
Okay, so President Biden aims to achieve a carbon-free pollution sector power sector by 2035, and he wants to ensure that 50% of all new vehicles sold in the U.S. are EVs or plug-in hybrids by 2030. At the same time, he's raised tariffs, and from our early story, we know that that action and that goal are in tension. So these two things are happening simultaneously. It can seem a bit confusing, but it does make sense if seen through the lens of politics and policy. He's building a policy in a way to make it politically enduring. So through the IRA, EPA rules, and the tariffs, he's trying to create a pro-carbonization support base across the U.S. I think it's going to be interesting to see if he actually can pull off this balancing act. It's probably the one he needs to do, but it's a difficult one. John?
Yeah, and Robinson talks about those risks in Biden's strategy and showcases them pretty well. So if Trump gets reelected, he would likely keep the tariffs, but could attempt to repeal subsidies for clean energy, which could essentially freeze America's decarbonization progress. If Biden can't get all interest groups on board for one common goal, it may lead to a slowdown of clean energy buildout. And lastly, if America produces enough solar panels to meet demand, they may not be able to lower the prices enough. These risks are unique to America since our politics are so heavily influenced by the oil industry, and most countries import more oil than they produce, so they're eager to transition to affordable clean energy. All right, Mike, our last story.
We welcome Stephen Robert Miller from Yale E360. He has a piece, Can a California oil field be retrofitted to store solar energy? Stephen, welcome to the show. Can I just ask, for those who haven't read the piece yet, what's the big takeaway?
Hey guys, thanks for having me. It's good to be here. Yeah, the big takeaway is, California has a big goal of meeting, I think it's 52 gigawatts of stored energy. They're right now heavily relying on lithium ion batteries to do that. And this is an experiment. And if successful, it would find a way of holding energy for a very long period of time. We're talking more than 1,000 hours underground in existing oil and gas reservoirs.
Stephen, I was really interested by your story, and I've heard about some startups working in this space, and they each kind of seem to go at it a different way. But coming back to the concepts of CSP, as you noted, has this been tried before? Have we gotten to even, pilot project stage for this kind of technology, or has it mostly just been, press release fodder for the last several years?
As far as I'm aware, I've seen some projects that use like boreholes.
Hmm.
There was a project in Oman that tried to do something similar. I think Fervo and Princeton is working on something that would use EGS to do it. But as far as I'm aware, this is the only project that's really that's attempting to use existing oil reservoirs, naturally occurring oil reservoirs, to store energy. And they're at the stage, or if they finish this thing, hoping by 2027, their initial 10 kilowatt rollout will be the demonstration project that proves this technology.
Stephen, I'm really intrigued by your reporting here. I'm involved with a company that is aspiring to use idled oil and gas pipelines as transmission wires, basically renewable
Yeah.
energy, compressing air, putting the air through the pipeline, and using the power infrastructure at both ends of the pipeline to drive the grid, essentially.
You can name
And
them, Mike. It's okay.
his name's Breeze.
There you
Really
go.
intriguing. So, but the thing, your story resurfaced for me this question, which is, what do you see the oil and gas industry's relationship to the clean energy transition? How do you see it unfolding in the future? Because the only thing I can take away is it's complicated. You get some players that are just like, we're going to pull the last drop of oil out of the ground, and you've got other players that are doing things like this, where they're kind of sticking their toe in the water. And I'm really interested what your thoughts are coming on the back end of the story.
I think some of the biggest players actually in that world are doing more than sticking their toe in especially in geothermal now. I think that is the big thing. I mean, I came onto this story because I was reporting on the Geothermal Rising conference in Reno the end of last year. And I heard Mike Umbro, who's with Premier Resource Management, which is behind this geotest project in Kern County, California. He was talking about the potential to just seamlessly transition oil workers into, geothermal work. And that's what initially got me interested in this story, because I think it's also a really fascinating topic. I think there's no way this is really going to go well if we're leaving behind a huge portion of the working class and a huge portion of people who are really skilled at this stuff. And I think I've been more and more intrigued by the possibility of geothermal. Maybe because of that, because there's so much investment already in the technology and the infrastructure needed to make it sing. I think there's a lot of potential there.
Yeah, and Fervo CEO Tim Latimer talks about that all the time. They're based in Houston. They have offices down there. They're not trying to just be this sexy Silicon Valley clean tech startup that pulls in all this money and doesn't do anything. He's talking about, I'm hiring people from the oil fields every day. I'm curious because you mentioned Fervo and enhanced geothermal. Do you think even a technology like this can benefit from some of those tailwinds that we're seeing in geothermal right now, and how it seems like a pretty popular area of our industry at this point?
Sorry, John, can you repeat that question? You froze up there for me.
Yeah, do you think that this technology and using these either capped or existing oil wells, and trying this for a first time benefits from those tailwinds we're seeing in enhanced geothermal and the popularity around companies like Fervo?
Yeah, I think there's definitely some aspect of that. It's kind of like the rising tide lifts all ships thing. I think EGS is opened the door to the possibilities of geothermal energy. What's interesting about what's actually a limitation of this project, geotest, right, is that it only works if you have an existing natural oil reservoir. And that's really cool because, I mean, in this area, we're talking about Kern County. This is a heavily oil dependent portion of California. There's more than 28,000 wells that are abandoned or idle, just sitting out there.
Wow.
And so this has, which is like the most, right? It's a huge number. And it's incredibly toxic and it's incredibly expensive to cap them and clean them up. And this is an opportunity, if it's proven, right, to find a way to move forward with them and make something valuable out of them. But there's also limitation because you can only use this particular technology in places where those wells exist already, right? What Fervo and Princeton are doing with their project is using EGS, so you could do it elsewhere in the country where those wells don't exist. And of course, that's a little bit more conflicted among some people, but it would open the doors on wider distribution.
John, we are just about out of time. We need to go to our Cleantecher of the week.
Yeah, this week's Cleantecher of the Week is Gregg Patterson, CEO of Origami Solar. Gregg is leading the effort to reframe the global solar industry with recycled steel, replacing aluminum solar module frames. This entire effort is designed to lower the carbon pollution footprint of the global solar industry. So congratulations to Gregg.
Well, I want to thank our wonderful producer, Brian Mendez, and Alex Peterson and Claire Quirin, who is off her performance improvement program she was stuck on for having us tape early in the morning. She's out of jail. It's good. Okay. So anyway, but we're grateful to all three of them for their help on this show.
Yeah, and thanks to Stephen Robert Miller for joining us on this episode of This Week in Clean Tech. Please subscribe, give us feedback, and share those story recommendations, and we'll see you all next week. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Stephen.
Thank you. Take care.